Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Friday's webinar, where we'll be looking at calculating and analysing biodiversity net gain within the Land App. For those that's not met me, I'm Dan. I'm one of the directors of Land App and delighted to be sharing a tool that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and we're really seeing some good uptake in the sector. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. This is a webinar, which means that your camera will remain off and your microphone will be muted throughout. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. Please do use the Q&A function for any questions that you'd like me to answer or at least try to answer at the end. However, I do believe we've also enabled today the chat function. So if you want to say hello, talk to one another throughout the webinar, please do. And as this session is being recorded, we will be sharing the recording at the end, or probably early next week, unless we can get it on YouTube today. Finally, once you leave the webinar, as usual, we've got a feedback survey, which you will be asked to answer. I think there's just 5 or 6 questions. It really does help inform these webinars, so please do take that survey if you can, whenever you leave. Well, today's webinar is really around biodiversity net gain. I'm not going to be getting too much into the specifics of exactly what biodiversity net gain is in the wider context of the planning system. It's more about how to apply biodiversity net gain within Land App. And I'm just going to be talking you through some of the tools that are going to help. Before I do a bit of a product update, just point you towards what we've been working on. I'm going to give a bit of an overview on the different tools that I'll be showing, and then I'll be doing a live walkthrough, which should take me around 40 minutes, and then we should have about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. As a note, for the biodiversity net gain tool kit, which I'll be making clear, it is part of our professional subscription, which starts at £30 per user per month. So we do have lots of other webinars. So this is obviously going to be very heavily focused on that biodiversity net gain workflow. However, we do have lots of other webinars that cover the whole range of different things, everything from introductory training, how to use the new mobile app, getting ready for sustainable farm incentive. And if you just search Land App on YouTube, you should be able to find all of those and more. Just a little plug, soon you'll be able to register for an upcoming webinar, which is our product update. It's on Friday, the 25th of October. There's something to put in your diaries. I do believe the registration link is on our website, and it will be led, not by myself, it'll be led by our product lead, Jack Cow, where he's going to be diving into some of the product releases we've done over the last 6 months. And we've been discussing it the last couple of weeks, and there's been a lot of great improvements, some of which I've covered in previous webinars, but there's a lot of other new things that haven't been given perhaps the light of day that they deserve. So please do join that webinar if you're interested in a more broader overview of what we've been working on. One of the key things that we've been, I suppose, championing for the last couple of months is we partnered with the People's Trust for Endangered Species, and Land App Mobile now hosts their Healthy Hedgerow template. So anyone who's interested in both assessing their hedgerows, getting that kind of baseline understanding of what condition their hedgerows are in, but also anyone who's interested in managing their hedgerows and understanding what good management looks like, this tool is for you. There's a whole range of functionalities. We've got a webinar that's been recorded and shared through our YouTube. But in particular, I'd really have a little look at the management advice, which you can, I guess, request from Land App via the People's Trust of Endangered Species, and that really gives you bespoke hedgerow advice based on your hedges that you've assessed through the app. So do have a little look on YouTube or on our website for a bit more. And then finally, final plug before I get into the BNG bit is we are currently, for the whole of October, running a customer feedback survey. We really want to hear from you. It gives you an opportunity to share your thoughts about how you're finding the Land App, but also start to steer the product roadmap as we look forward. So I think towards the tail end of that feedback survey, you can both give some ideas about what you'd like to see Land App focus on next, but also upvote, I believe, anyone who's previously said some product features as well. And just to incentivize, we have got a £150 voucher for Amazon for those that enter. They go into a raffle, and the lucky winner will be chosen early November. So what I want to talk about is biodiversity net gain. Biodiversity net gain as a principle is really there to help Natural England and the planning system start to quantify the impact of development on biodiversity and on nature. And a fundamental principle for the biodiversity net gain scheme is it's using habitat, both their extent, their size, their condition, and their location, as a proxy for the nature that it represents, the biodiversity it represents. So it's really there to try and understand how much of one habitat is in a certain location, and if that habitat is displaced by planning or by development, that it can be replicated in another location. So it's an idea of quantifying the extent of a certain type of habitat and its impact on wider biodiversity. We've built a set of tools that I'm going to outline now, you can see on your screen, that support the biodiversity net gain process. And really today, I'm going to kind of dive into these different steps. So on the screen is a bit of a kind of a process that we'll be following today. The first thing you need for a biodiversity net gain assessment is a baseline habitat map. And so we partner with the UK Hab and have created a workflow called the Best Guess Baseline, which I will be demonstrating, which I'll explain a bit more in a moment. Or you can have any other baseline habitat assessment. So just to clarify, you do not need the Best Guess Baseline to run the biodiversity net gain tool. However, it is there to try and speed up your process, but also improve the accuracy and quality of the data. Alongside that baseline habitat assessment, you need you can optionally have a land management plan. And this land management plan is a future vision of what the farm or what the area could become. So it's a understanding that in this one field, we could create woodland or scrub or wetland. And those two data layers, with the baseline being mandatory and the land management plan being optional, can be run through our two biodiversity toolkit tools. And those are the two that I'm going to speak about today. So within the toolkit, we've got a biodiversity net gain estimator, and we've also got a biodiversity net gain auto-populator. Hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will be fully well-versed in exactly what they mean. And so those three things combined together give you a biodiversity net gain assessment. So just quickly, what is the UK Habitat Best Guess Baseline? The Best Guess Baseline is an automated data workflow that we've created that takes Ordnance Survey master map data, which is an authoritative data set for the whole of Great Britain. And it runs that data through a number of different data queries, requesting from data sets, as of today, different bits of information around habitat type. So, for example, it looked through a lot of the arm's length body data sets for both England, Scotland, and Wales. So it looked through priority habitat. It looked through the forest inventory from the Forestry Commission. It also looks at designations as well. It then also goes to look at Earth observation data. We have a look at Sentinel-2 data to see any temporal changes in the habitat. That might be, for example, when was that grassland established? Is it a temporary grassland or is it a permanent grassland? Which is quite hard to see sometimes when you're in the field. And then finally, we also look at something called the vegetation object model, which is just a data set that is derived from LiDAR, which ultimately detects any trees or scrub that are over 2.5 meters. It then runs all of those data through a prioritization logic, and it spits out a single clean UK habitat map. And that is the starting point for your biodiversity net gain assessment. Anyone who is using the biodiversity net gain toolkit will be on the professional subscription, and those on the professional subscription do get 30% discount on the UK Habitat Best Guess Baseline. We have made some improvements to the Best Guess Baseline, and to thank you to all the users that have been contributing and letting us know where there's improvement. So we've been really focusing on moorland and upland detection. That's been a key focus area. Also improving our grassland type. So, differentiating between calcareous, neutral, modified grassland, and also trying to get our woodland classification further down than just understanding between broadleaf and conifer, just understanding if we can detect anything more, and also looking at management as well. So if anyone is using the Best Guess Baseline, we call it a best guess for a reason. We're not guaranteeing that it's correct, but it's a really good starting point. But the more that users can contribute back to the system, the better we can improve the models. So anyone who is using UK Hab data and wants to contribute, please do get in touch, because it's a really nice, process for us to ensure that we can improve that service. So the first tool within the biodiversity net gain toolkit I just want to give you an overview of, and I will demo, is we've got this biodiversity net gain estimator. And this is a way of taking your baseline habitat data, running it through the statutory metric, and producing baseline units. And if you have got a land management plan in place, we will also generate the uplift unit from that change as well. The biodiversity net gain estimator, its main use is very quickly to understand the potential of each of the different field parcels or blocks of land within the site. So it uses the statutory metric. They are as accurate as you've mapped them, and they reproject those units back onto the features. So you can get this, I suppose, geospatial understanding of where the units are delivered against what habitat, etc. The second one, which is a bit more of I suppose, a deeper dive into the unit themselves, is we've also built what we call the BNG Unit Auto-populator. So from your data that sits on Land App, your baseline and your land management plan, we can send you a pre-formatted biodiversity metric calculator from Natural England to your email inbox. And so what this is trying to do is it's trying to speed up that time between once you've got a plan agreed to getting it into the format that you're going to need to apply for those units or register those credits. Once it's in this calculator, it's obviously a bit more editable, i.e. you can change the strategic significance, you can play around with the habitat type, and so it's just there as a tool to hopefully make your life a little bit easier. So we've got that planning stage that I'm going to mainly focus on, but it also then comes down to this, once you've got that plan in place, getting it into the more formal tool and calculator. Before I start my demo, just some key rules for biodiversity units on Land App. We're using the BNG toolkit. Just one, every site you're working on, just have one authoritative site boundary. Try and avoid having lots of different boundaries. Just create one nice boundary that says, here's our area of interest. Really focus on that naming convention. So particularly as you start to scale using Land App more and more, the more you can consistently name things, the better. So using, for example, the template type and then a site name and a surname is quite a good way. So BHA underscore Manor Farm underscore Geerah could be a way of us naming those maps eventually. And then the final one is that for your BNG, you want to make sure you've got one baseline habitat map per site, which is down to what we call level 3 plus in the UK Habitat Code. And so that basically just needs to mean that it's above level 3. You're not just saying an area of grassland, you're saying it's G2A lowland calcareous grassland, for example. So just make sure you're giving it enough information for it to be able to generate units. Woodland, grassland, as a habitat isn't enough. It needs to be more specific. It needs to be a type of broadleaf or a type of conifer or a type of grassland, etc. And we've got a full guidance on that on our website, on our help center, sorry. I think there's an FAQs page for BNG. Then the outputs, just so we're all aligned, when we do calculate the biodiversity units for you, we never provide condition scores. So unless you provide us with the condition scores, we assume moderate. We assume moderate because we just don't have a way of confidently detecting it, and we rely and want to continue relying on an ecological survey to properly get a condition. So if you don't put in a condition, we both for the baseline and the land management plan assume moderate. And then with the strategic significance multiplier, which gives you an extra 15% uplift for your units, we use the Natural England Habitat Combined layer to just understand whether that site is in the network, yes or no. If it is, you get the 15% or the 1.15 uplift. And if it's not, you just get a multiplier of just 1, then you don't get any of that additional strategic uplift. Just to reiterate, once it's in that calculator through the auto-populator, you can change the strategic significance. We just make an assumption to try and give a bit more pragmatism to the output. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of a live demo. I'm going to show you the 2 ways to create a baseline habitat map. So I'm going to just create the best guess baseline. So I'm going to purchase one and just talk that through. But I'm also just going to show you how you can also create a best guess, a UK habitat map, sorry, with an FBI number. So there's 2 different workflows they're going to show. I'm then going to create some land management plan scenarios. They're not going to be perfect, but I just want to show you and demonstrate the tool. And then we're going to talk through those 2 biodiversity net gain toolkit, the estimator and the statutory metric auto-populator. So I'm assuming that most of you on the call are familiar with the Land App. Just very quickly, we're found at thelandapp.com. We're an online mapping platform. You can register for free. We've got a lot of free functionality that's being used across the sector. But very much today, I'm speaking about the professional subscription. Once you've logged in, you'll be met with what's called the map dashboard, where you can see all the maps that you've previously created. And just for now, I'm going to create a demo. BNG webinar, October 24. We're going to assign it to a team. I think we've got an ecology team. We don't data management. I do that and demo maps. These team tags just allow you, if you've got a growing number of users within LandApp, to assign certain individuals to certain teams, and therefore they can only see data relevant to their team. If you want to learn more, please do see the Help Center. Okay, so what I'm going to first do is I want to create an area of interest for my biodiversity net gain assessment. Like I said, I'm going to start by doing a best guess baseline and then just quickly show you the SDI route as well. To get an interesting site, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the priority habitat layer. I'm going to go to an area that's got a bit of water and hopefully some priority habitat. Yeah, what is kind of the diversity of them? Maybe this loop. So here's my I'm going to pretend I've got a site here. Remember, if you've already got a location, you can search for a postcode or a what 3 words or a coordinates in the top. The first thing I then need to do is to create that red line boundary. So the easiest way to do that is using the land registry data, which can be accessed by hitting new at the top left. You can then hit import data and you can choose the first option, which is pick from land registry. From there, classic, the area I was going to go for is just outside, but that's fine, we can use this bit. This loads of the land registry data. The reason there's some white space here is because that land hasn't been, nothing has happened to it on the land registry since a certain date in the 1980s. So it hasn't changed hands, it hasn't changed size, it hasn't changed anything, and therefore it's not been digitized. And that's out of our control because it's the land registry. But I am going to just select on this polygon just to be my area of interest. I've got a bit of river. I think I've got a bit of priority habitat as well. I then hit next, and then I can basically choose from one of our many templates. For the red line boundary, there is a template called ownership boundary, which I can find towards the bottom of my list. And I'm just going to keep it called land registry parcel. So what I've got is I've got a site that has a bit of priority habitat in, but also I've got this area that is not priority habitat. I can now turn off that layer and just for visuals, just to see what it looks like. Interesting. Okay, it might be lower condition than I thought. Okay, so I've now got a red line boundary. This red line boundary, you can do a couple of things too. You can style it. You can fill it with a certain color. You can add a label to it, such as the area, maybe the title number as well. And you can start to create quite a nice plan about what you're doing. For the biodiversity, for the UK Habitat Best Guess baseline, what you do need is you need an Ordnance Survey master map license. And so for this site, I'm first going to purchase an OS master map license, which I do by hitting the new button at the top left. I hit download data and I choose the top option, which is master map topography. I can then choose my plan, which in this case is my land registry parcels, and I can give it a name, which is called site A, for example. And you can see I'm getting a quote from Ordnance Survey for the master map of this layer. So for this site, it's £86. The price of this is dictated not only on the hectareage, but also its proximity to an urban environment. So the closer you are to an urban area, the more expensive it will be. I'm then going to accept that and download that data. And what that's now doing is that's going to our Ordnance Survey master map database, and it's going to extract all the features that make up the master map. Before waiting for that to serve, I can now trigger the best guess baseline by going back into download data and finding on the list the UK Habitat best guess baseline. I can then search for an OS valid license, which will be the latest one. I can obviously search for the site as well, site A. I can give it a name, site A. And if you've got an SBI number for it, you can also pop it in. And so for this site, additionally to the £86, it's another £25 to get the best guess baseline. So in all, I'm spending £100 plus VAT to get this data. But we hope that £100 will save you time, but also give you the data in an accurate and usable format. Okay. And so depending on how big your site is, this can take between 10 seconds and 5 minutes. You do receive an email from LandApp that says how long it takes. So I'm actually just trying to see, see how long it's going to take. My Ordnance Survey has just come through, which is great. It says 2.5 minutes. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview on some of the other tools while we wait for that data to come through. So you can see that now my land registry path has been split from 2 polygons into lots of different compartments themed by Ordnance Survey master map. So Ordnance Survey thinks these yellow blocks are all agricultural lands. I've got a chunk of inland water, which is that river. I've also down along this edge got some scrub. But the fundamental difference between this and the best case baseline is this isn't in the language of the biodiversity net gain. This is in Ordnance Survey master map language, not as a UK habitat layer. While I'm waiting for that to come through, just a reminder, we've got lots of different data layers that can help you understand, I guess, the potential for this site. Flood zones are going to be the first one I turn on. So you can see if I turn on flood zone, pretty much the entirety of this site is in a flood zone. So when I'm thinking about my land management plan, I'm going to be thinking about habitats that are perhaps more on the wetter side of things. I can also look at designations. So for example, I can check if it's a triple SI. I can check for other scheduled monuments, national parks, nitrate vulnerable zones, which can take a bit of time, i.e. turning on all these different data layers can take a bit of time. So what I would always recommend is instead of turning on all the data layers to see it visually, you can actually run a report, which is found at the top of your screen under reports. And you can ask the land app through the data layers tab, which data layers does my site intersect? So I'm just going to quickly run a report for my land registry parcels. And I want land app to tell me which designations, what habitats, what utilities, and what water. So you can choose them all. Right, A. And this is just a nice, quick way for me as a advisor that I know I'm time poor, I've got deadlines to meet. I can very quickly understand what is the potential of this site. What have I got to consider when I'm building a biodiversity net gain plan? Hopefully this will generate in 5 seconds. Yeah, the loading bar has begun. And just to define what's happening, we're basically taking that red line boundary and kind of cookie cutting it all the way through our data layers. Where does it touch any of our data layers? And then we'll summarize it back as kind of a spreadsheet report that you can download or share with a client, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to come through. And the baseline, I've got an email as well behind the scenes saying that my baseline is complete as well. It's loading. Great. Okay, well, while that I'll come back to that report. I don't know why it's not loading, to be honest. We will have a look in a moment. It should take a matter of time. So I'm just going to hit back to my map. And within here, while we're waiting for that report, we've got this best guess baseline that's come through. And so what we've turned that Ordnance Survey master map into, which was this, is into a detailed habitat map, best guess of what habitats are found within this site. So for example, we've got some priority habitat floodplain wetland mosaic, or GFGM, which I think was the old name, coastal grazing flood marsh, flood grazing marsh, I can't remember exactly what that stands for, which is one layer. And also down to the south, we've got this modified grassland bit. My BNG, this is going to be something that I want to focus on, but perhaps improving the condition of these sites. On top of that kind of clean polygon layer, we also serve that vegetation model. And these are basically all of the trees or scrub that are over 2.5 meters on that site. And what that gives you is it gives you that 3-dimensional view that you can probably pick up through the satellite imagery, like so, but it gives you slightly more, I guess, detail about what it looks like. As a note, and this might be the case here, depending on the management in the last year, this data was generated end of 2022, start of 2023. So that, pinch of salt, it's a best guess. And actually looking at the satellite, it might be that has recently been, I guess the vegetation has disappeared for some reason, looking at that. Okay, so what we've got is we've now got a baseline. I'm just going to quickly show you some of the key tools for getting it ready for BNG units. And then I will quickly show you the SBI number route as well, so people are aware of that process. So the first thing, once you get your best guess baseline, is to do a bit of a desktop ground truthing, like I've just been doing. I'm questioning, for example, the vegetation of this size over 2.5 meters, but maybe a site visit is needed. But I can basically click on each of these polygons and make sure that I'm happy with the code. So I've got floodplain, wetland, mosaic, happy with that. It was on the priority habitat, so that's where it's been picking that up from. Down to the south, it's picking up modified grassland. Again, quite hard to tell whether that's correct or not, but that's just what the model is saying. So I'm pretty happy with those codes, to be honest. If I wasn't, for example, if I think actually this bit is more floodplain grazing mosaic, I can change it by hitting the change button at the top right hand side, and put in flood, and you can basically search for those certain codes and update the baseline. So that baseline can be updated by changing the primary habitats. Also note we've got the river as well, has been mapped as well, which is useful. The other thing that you can update the baseline habitat assessment is things like condition. So for this site, I've not been on a site visit, so I could just leave it with a condition blank, which, as I said earlier, Landat will assume is moderate. But just looking at the images and just to get some good numbers, I'm going to assume that all of them are in poor condition. So I've selected them all and I've given them all the poor condition. And I also can do the same over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that these ones are moderate. Okay, so I've got some moderate G4 grassland and I've got some poor condition floodplain grazing mosaic. For this site, I can now build a plan. So I want to understand how does this site improve, or how do I start estimating what the biodiversity unit potential is of this site. I can very quickly get the baseline units, but what I really want to do is just come up with a future plan that shows this, in 30 years, what this site might look like. So my starting point, for example, is I want to know if I were to turn this modified grassland down to the south into that floodplain grazing mosaic, how many units could I generate? And what I do is I hold shift and I'm selecting both of the modified grasslands. I'm then right clicking and I'm creating a new plan by hitting copy to a plan. And from here, create new plan, give it a name, land management plan underscore site A, Geerah, following naming convention. And I want to find in this list land management plan. We're now on version 2 because UK Habitat has updated the version 2, but land management plan is the one I want. When I hit create new plan, all I'm doing is I'm bringing over the polygons that I've selected, which in this case is just the modified grassland, onto a new plan called land management plan. So it's kind of overlapping. I've got these two copies of the grassland at the moment. Within that land management plan, what I can now do is I can tell Landat what I want it to become. And so that could just be as simple as putting all of it into a floodplain grazing mosaic like this. And I get the total hectareage, and I also can change the condition. So I could say I'm trying to get a good floodplain grazing mosaic from that area, although do double check or speak to an ecologist about that condition element. You want to make sure it's achievable and attainable. So I can either do that broad brush, or I can make it a slightly more bespoke plan. And so we've got lots of different drawing tools that you can use to kind of illustrate what this actually could look like in the future. So for example, we could maybe think about widening the vegetation along this edge, letting it grow up. We've got a mixture of that floodplain grazing mosaic and maybe a bit of a scrubby corner as well. Gosh, the color of that river on that satellite, not the color you'd expect to see. Right, so what I would do is I'm going to right click on my land management plan, so my land management plan, future state, and I'm going to choose the split tool. And that split tool, I'm basically going to draw a crude shape like so, which can represent my scrubby edge. So H3H, for example, is the mixed scrub code I want. So now, rather than just checking the biodiversity units of just the floodplain grazing, I'm also doing a bit of a scrub corridor just to check the potential. And I could also do the same over here. I could turn this whole area into a scrub or not. So what I've got is that future plan. From here, I can now run the biodiversity estimator. But just to demonstrate one of the extra processes, I'm also going to bring over one of these sites that I want to turn from poor into good condition. So instead of just looking at one land use change, I'm also going to bring over just this one block of land and say what happens if I turn that from poor to good. Okay, so I've now got a bit of a biodiversity net gain plan. I've understood my baseline, which is these ones. And I've understood what my plan is, which is to improve the condition, but also expand the floodplain grazing mosaic. I now can access that biodiversity net gain estimator. And I access that through the baseline habitat assessment, which is this one. I find the toolbox, And within the toolbox, I've got access to those two tools. I've got Estimate Biodiversity Net Gain, and I've got Auto-populate the BNG metric. The first one I want to use is this Estimate Biodiversity Net Gain, hit run, and what LandApp is doing is it's sending the baseline and the land management plan through the statutory metric. And so the statutory metric is now calculating what if this habitat was created, how many units. One thing I didn't check earlier is this is strategic significance, so habitat network. So actually, this is outside of the strategic significance site. You can see it's not in a priority habitat network. Only those areas in the brown and the greys are going to get given that 1.15. What you should receive in your inbox is a email once it's ready. So the process is running in the moment in the background. And if I refresh my screen, he says, yeah, once I've refreshed my screen, what I've now had returned is these two BNG plans. I've got my BNG baseline plan, which shows just the baseline as is. However, within each of these fields, we have what's known as the baseline units. So I can see how many biodiversity units just as is, those are worth. And so that's looking at the condition, which we said was poor, its proximity to the strategic significance, and the uplift. Not the uplift, sorry. The uplift plan then does exactly the same, but it works out not only the baseline, but also the future value. So in this case, the baseline was 39.42. The future value from going from just a poor condition to a good condition was 70, which means the uplift is 30.95. So that gives you the understanding of what's currently happening in terms of the uplift units. Let's have a look at the creation plan. So the creation plan, the baseline was 23, the post-intervention was 45, which means the uplift is 21.8. So you can see now from these two sites, this site, which is going from poor to good, but the habitat's not changing, gives me an uplift of enhancement unit of 30.95. And then this one, which is a creation, because I'm creating new habitat, gives me, actually, sorry, that's a lie. I apologize. Going from modified grassland to floodplain grazing mosaic is a uplift of 21.8 because it's still an enhancement. It's not changing broad habitat size. Take a pause. So what that then shows is that you can very quickly understand the uplift from your site by just drawing a baseline, creating a land management plan, and running it through the BNG estimator. Okay. I'm going to come back to this site in a minute. I just want to quickly show you the SBI version of how to get to a baseline, but the process after that baseline is exactly the same. You still need to create a detailed habitat map, and you will need to create a land management plan if you want to create uplift. But just to quickly show you, for those on the call that don't perhaps want to buy the best guess baseline and do have an SBI number, what you can do is you can go new, import from the RPA and type in the SBI number. You need the land covers, which is kind of how the RPA splits up the habitat type. And you bring it firstly into a basic payment scheme. By bringing it into a basic payment scheme, we extract from the RPA the different land uses. And you can see now where the RPA thinks it's grassland and where you've got this arable land. From here, you can amend the arable land to say what's in the ground, which for us is Lucerne. It looks like that. Once you've got a basic payment scheme that looks a bit like this, you can simply duplicate it into a baseline habitat assessment by hitting duplicate and baseline habitat assessment. Let me just call this BHA underscore Norney Geerah. And what that would do is it will then translate the BPS into UK HAB for you. So you can see now I've got a UK HAB code for each of these polygons. As per my slides, though, you need to make sure that all of these grasslands, for example, aren't just G grasslands. They're down to level 3+, which could be modified grassland, for example. And I know Tim's got a priority habitat down which you want to hear. Like so. From there, the process is exactly the same. I'm just going to turn my camera off because I feel like I'm lagging a little bit. Um, so yeah, basically that's the quickest way of getting your baseline from an SBI number. Download the SBI number to a BPF and then convert it into a baseline habitat assessment. Okay, so going back to site A, which is this one, what I want to quickly show you is the auto-populator. So what we've done is we've created a scenario. We've got this, and we've got this future plan. And what we want to do is we want to send it as an auto-populated BNG assessment to my email. So we can ignore these BNG plans. I would almost recommend locking the two BNG outputs. Don't ever really edit these directly. Just keep editing your original plans, just so then you know you've got the source of truth in the right place. But instead of hitting the biodiversity, instead of hitting the estimator, what I'm doing is hitting toolbox and then auto-populate my BNG metric. So what this is going to do is instead of serving me the units onto a map like it did before, which was this uplift plan, it's going to send me an email with a fully formatted BNG toolbox. It takes between 2 and 4 minutes, so I probably won't wait until the output is sent to me. However, in the true Blue Peter fashion, what I've done is a bit of prep. And so the example output is that we send you the data that looks like this. So this is for Tim's Norney farm earlier. It says what the baseline was, what the output of the offsite habitat were. So the offsite is the bit that you're creating. And then you can also see if you've got a creation in there. It's all fully formatted and you can edit the different significance, for example, and then see how that affects your numbers. So it's taking that idea of building that baseline plan, getting it to a point where you're happy with it, with either yourself, your clients, friends, and neighbors, and then sending it as a formatted plan via the statutory metric calculator to your email address. So yeah, I can still see it's running in the background, so it's not quite ready yet. So that is pretty much the end-to-end I wanted to show. So I'm happy to finish a little bit early in terms of demo, actually bang on time. One thing I didn't show is you can create multiple uplift plans. So if you wanted to, you don't just have to have one land management plan, which I've got here. You could create multiple. And what the Land app does is it will create a separate BNG calculation for every unique land management plan you've got. So you can have one baseline, and then you can also have multiple uplift plans on your map. But anyway, I will end there. Looking forward to having some questions. So please do ask and let me know if there's anything I can help with. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you. I've got my Rosie and Kathy behind the scenes are helping. So question from Lucy says, it seems like the tool can calculate the total units available for each habitat type post-intervention with baseline units subtracted. Can the tool do this when the proposed plans become more complicated, different habitat types that vary between habitat creation and enhancement? Yeah, Lucy, it can go really quite detailed. I mean, I've done quite a basic overview here, but because it uses geospatial, it can be really quite complex. So I could have, for example, a complex scrub here that I'm turning into floodplain mosaic, which would then be a creation. I could have here, I don't know, this is me editing the baseline, by the way. This baseline could have looked like, we probably don't want to destroy any upland woodlands, broadleaf woodland, for example. And that means when I rerun it now, which there's going to be an element of creation here. Actually, I feel bad doing a woodland. Let's not do a woodland. Let's pretend it's cropland. Like so. Let's say imagine this is cropland. So I want to turn a cropland into a floodplain grazing mosaic. When I run it, which just a reminder, will go from this to this. That's going to be my change. It will handle all of those, both in terms of creation and in terms of the enhancement as well. So once that comes through, Lucy, I'll show you. Stephanie, how do you factor in the time for delivery? In a matrix column, there's time, habitat change has already happened. Yeah, Stephanie, that's a really good point. We assume you're at year 0 at the moment, and we forecast to 30 years. So that's why by us shipping it to the metric, you can kind of play around with those numbers. within here, because I know there's the delay and starting columns that you can add. So we just assume you're on year 0. If you need to retrospectively, I guess, bank it, you can edit that within this auto-populator rather than doing it in the app. The app's very much just there to quickly give you that potential rather than doing the full estimator. So yeah, just to show you the uplift then, I've got 2 uplift plans now because it basically ran the BNG uplift again. But you can see now, hopefully, that I get some creation as well as some enhancements. So this one's created units rather than enhancement unit, as is this, turning from cropland to floodplain grading mosaic. Alice, does the BNG analysis take into account watercourses? Yep, it also estimates the watercourses and hedgerow units for you, Alice. So it stirs both the habitat, the watercourse, and the hedgerow lines. I didn't actually show you that in the demo, but in the baseline unit, it should have given me the watercourse up. Yeah, you can see this river, for example, it's got baseline of 2.67 watercourse units. So it should be handling all those as expected. You just need to draw your plan as you want it to look, and we will then calculate the units for you. So a couple of questions in the chat, I believe. If you please use the Q&A, because I think that's where the team are looking. Very impressive. Thanks for the demo, said Scott. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it. Question from Lynn. Can you explain a bit more about the strategic significance? Does this mean that the uplift will be locally strategically significant and therefore there might be possible funding for the improvement works? So Lynn, this isn't ecological advice. So within the calculator, actually, because I've got it here, strategic significance can be basically one of 3 categories. It can be in the local strategy, ecologically desirable, or not in the local strategy. By being formally identified in the local strategy, such as in the local nature recovery strategy, it gets a multiplier of 1.15. And if it's not in the strategy, it gets a value of 1, which means it gets 0, no uplift. We just use the proxy at the moment of the habitat networks to assume that's where roughly the local nature recovery strategies are going to be building. It might not be fully correct. And as of March, we should have the local nature recovery strategies live, which we'd love to get into the land app, obviously. If you're involved in those, please let us know. But it at least gives us some form of proxy to roughly where nature recovery is expected to happen according to Natural England. So it's in these areas that we assume you can get the uplift. When you go to apply for the biodiversity unit, however, it's up to the ecologist to deem which of those 3 categories it is. So the land app can't deem it. There's so many other factors that are just going to be impossible for us to say. It's up to the ecologist to say, is that formally identified? Is it ecologically desirable, or is it in no strategic area at all? So we're very much just estimating at the moment, but for you to get the perfect number, it would just be the case of a conversation or looking at the local strategy, if you've already got one, to be able to justify that 15% uplift. Perfect. Question from Amanda. Why didn't you assume good condition rather than moderate in the absence of a site visit to confirm the actual condition? Surely this is safer than risking the underestimated baseline value. Yeah, Amanda, it's a really good point. And I guess, the view we've taken is we don't want to, our better stance is to undervalue rather than overvalue, simply because we don't want to assume that something is better than it is. Obviously, the importance is going to get an ecological survey done for us to get a good condition assessment to understand that it is good. If you want to get that maximum, so Amanda, if you say, actually, I disagree that I want it all to be in good condition for the uplift, you can manually change that. So you can select, for example, on your land management plan, select all of the features. Sorry, I've got the webinar chat in the way. Select all of the areas like so, and turn on the condition, and you can turn them all to good. So I'm now making all of my future land management plan good to then see that maximum potential. So you have the flexibility to tailor the condition. You don't have to rely on the moderate. It just makes it, I guess, a standardization that we assume moderate unless told otherwise. Otherwise, yeah, we get caught up in actually that wasn't good condition, it was poor, etc. Question from Elizabeth. What's the best way to draw river rewiggling to calculate potential uplift? Are relatively smooth curve possible? Yeah, it's a really good question, Elizabeth. The best way that I would do it is to say I wanted to draw a rewiggled river through here. The first thing I'd do is draw a line. So you get the line. Next, I would hold shift on my keyboard. So I'm holding shift, click once and hold. And what I can do is I can use my cursor to rewiggle like so. So I've held shift and that allows me to do a bespoke line rather than just the straight lines that we normally do, like so. I've gone a bit over the top, just delete that bit. So I've got this wiggly line, which has got lots of different points. And then I add a buffer to that line. So I can then add a buffer on one or two sides, say it's 3 meters, hit subtract and hit OK. And then assign it to my river code. So priority has that river. So that is now my river going through. I've subtracted it, so I've got that area isn't overlapping, and that's my land management plan. And so now if I reran the estimator, it would tell me how many units that river would be worth, which is quite exciting. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, draw a line. You can obviously tidy up the edges, but at least you get a bit of a wiggle through there. Holding shift is the key one. For those landowners lacking time or technical wizardry, do you offer a paid service where the land app perform all the analysis on the baseline and BNG uplift that you just walked us through? So we have actually started doing this. And the line is we're not advisors, we're not insured to give advice, but we are a tool provider. So we can train you up using existing sites. So we have worked with some larger estates where we've kind of, as a service, we've got them the best guess baseline, we've spoke them through the process, and we've also then calculated some uplift based on some hypothetical scenarios. We obviously have to say that you need to get an ecologist to go and ground truth if you are going to apply for them, but just to quickly understand potential, that's a good way. And the other thing to say is that we also are just about to launch what's called the accredited professionals, where a network of our users are there to help. So just get in touch if you need support. If you don't think you've got the technical skill set or the time, we're happy to link you up with the right person that can help, whether that's from an advisory level outside of LandApp or just internally on LandApp as well. Okay, it looks like the questions have slowed down. So I'm hoping what that means is I've answered everything. And we can maybe finish a little bit early. So what I would say is you need to be on a professional subscription to access it. The best guess baseline isn't mandatory, but it is really valuable, as I've hopefully shown. This, for the sake of £100, I saved myself a couple of hours of like getting it detailed, unless I have the SBI number, on which then that's a quick way of doing it. So if you want to get in touch with us at all, we've got a probably the easiest thing is a contact page on our website. So just we've got a contact form which you can. Gosh, where did we put the contact here? Where did we put the contact form? Need to remember. Contact, here we are. In the land up column, there's a contact button which you can get in touch with the team. And I do actually believe in the. So this is me testing. I know Kathy's on the call as well, who's been looking after our website. I think if you go in the data services or land app UK have, I think you can fill out a request form as well. Somewhere. I need to remember where that is. So that you've caught me off guard. Message us, support at the land app, message us through the contact form, or if you're in the land app already and you want help, remember we do have that in-app chat at the bottom right hand side of your screen where you can send us a message about who you're doing. If you want help, what it's about, and we can put someone in touch with you. But there's a huge amount of opportunity here to not commit to BNG. You know, we're still understanding what the market is, but it's really important for landowners to understand their potential. Do you have 50 units to sell or is it 500 units to sell? Being equipped with at least that knowledge is a really powerful place to be in. So I would really recommend, even if you're pretty sure you're not going to do BNG, work out what your potential is because you never know who's going to come knocking on the door next. And Rosie just put in the chat around the accredited professional. Elizabeth, the new nature recovery strategy map should be released next year, which will include the additional uplift. Do you have a plan for adding? Yeah, Elizabeth, as soon as we can get the geospatial nature recovery plans into LandApp, we will. We just need to work out if it's being centralized by Natural England, which hopefully it is. And then finally, a question from Stephanie. How do we get the matrix output, which then can be edited? Yeah, so I did that quite quickly, but you need to be on a professional subscription. You then need to go into where your baseline is at, which for me is this one. You click the three dots, and then it's within the toolbox that's here. And then you hit the auto-populate BNG metric calculator, and that sends you an email. So that'll just send you an email with everything I just showed you on this spreadsheet. So it kind of formalizes it all where you can edit it. It looks a bit like this. So it fills out all those rows for you without you having to manually fill them out. One thing I didn't show just in the final 2 minutes is the report. I'm hoping it'll be there. So just to show you, yeah, now that data layer to site A is run, I can very quickly, I'm going to close the right side, very quickly see what's about this site. So what local planning authority it's in, what county it's in. It's in a low sensitivity for woodland creation, might be a consideration. Agroforestry low risk. It's in a nitrate vulnerable zone. Yeah, I would be pretty confident that my land management plan is not a bad idea. You know, take that modified grassland, really improve the quality of it, and try and get that soil health being more saturated to hold more floodwater. And BNG would be a really nice route, I think, for this site. But obviously not advice, more just from a tool level. Okay, thank you all so much for joining. I'm assuming that the questions have dried up, which is absolutely fine. We will follow up with everyone that's registered for this at another date, not another date, over the next coming weeks. And in the meantime, please do fill out that survey. There's one when you leave the Land app webinar, but also there is the feedback just more generally around Land app that would be great for you to fill out as well. And you could win £150 Amazon voucher. So thank you all so much for attending and looking forward to speaking soon. Take care.